Hey guys, got another 3 stories for you today. The first one up is going to be about a rather unsavory brother-in-law. My husband has 3 brothers, and the youngest claims to be an expert in all things TTRPG related. Spoiler alert, he's not. I have killed him accidentally while GMing so often, because he makes stupid choices. I'm going to tell you about 3 of his most epically stupid character deaths. His first death, which was a rogue. The party was level 10 and learned that an ancient magma dragon had the information that they needed to defeat the BBEG. So they approached the dragon very, very respectfully, because this is a CR-17 creature that could just step on them. The cleric was negotiating with the dragon, and was making great progress, until my brother-in-law got bored. He looked around and realized that there's a magic treasure in this ancient dragon's cave. So he looked right at me and said, "I stealth and steal the sword." You mean the sword that's glowing with magic and only 20 feet away from the dragon? Okay, I think that's a really bad idea, and I would highly recommend against doing it. Okay, awesome roll there. Unfortunately for you, the dragon's bonus to perception is higher than your roll with bonuses, so he sees you stealing the sword. What's your AC? Yeah, sorry. He hits you, and you're dead now. This is a chaotic neutral creature we're talking about here, and he tried to steal from it. What else did you expect the reaction to be? Needless to say, he was very unhappy, but he made another character, and we moved on to his second death, which was a fighter this time. His next character was a noble but simple fighter. Loads of health, and dumb like a rock, but he listened to the other characters, so we're good. The party was in a dungeon, and they were utterly convinced that there was a trap somewhere along the hall, which is fair enough. There were a lot of dead bodies, and they looked like they died via magic. So they were hesitating and trying to come up with a way to trigger the obvious trap without getting caught in it. After all, the party rogue was now Dragon Chow. My wonderful brother-in-law looked at his sheet and declared that he was going to walk down the hall, and the cleric could just heal him afterwards. I warned him that some of the bodies had better armor and weapons than him, and he could infer that they were in fact much stronger than he. I cautioned him to wait, since the wizard and the cleric were getting close to figuring the puzzle out. But
"No, I don't want to wait for the stupid puzzle. I set my shield down and walk down the hall. I stomp on each tile to make sure that I trigger the trap. While I run down the hall, I also run my hands along the wall."
Which, with this, there was absolutely no avoiding him triggering the trap by some fudged rolls. Awesome. You trigger all 3 traps at once, as was designed to happen. Congratulations. You're dead. Again. Why don't we just rewind and let the rest of the party finish the puzzle? But no. He decided to storm off and come back the next week with his final character, which was a ranger this time. This was his last character, as I got sick of his passive-aggressive comments and his bullying of other characters to do what he wanted, and ended up kicking him from the group after this one. His ranger was a simple longbow build, and was pretty solid. The party was chasing the final villain through the capital, gearing up for the final showdown, and they ran across a few of his minions that I threw in for laughs. Those minions were gnome barbarians that I made as a joke, and assumed that my players would keep running across the rooftops to chase the villain. There was no way for the gnomes to get onto the rooftops, so it was just played for laughs. The party as a whole, -1, kept running, but my brother-in-law stopped. He stopped without telling the rest of the party, and split off all by himself. He climbed down off the rooftops and faced off against the gnome barbarians. He could have shot them from the safety of the roof, But no, he decided to go into melee with them. You know, the ranger, who specialized in ranged attacks, decided to use his dagger in melee against two barbarians. Two barbarians who, while yes, are gnomes, but are high enough level that it would be a challenge for even the entire party. And he's trying to solo them. Yet again, I offer to retcon and rewind this. Why don't you tell the party so that they can help you? Or just not climb off the roof and try to shoot at them? But as I'm sure you've noticed the trend now, his answer was no. And he insisted that this particular course of action was the best one because of reasons. Okay then, let's get to combat. Well, what do you know? He died again, and then threw a complete temper tantrum. He threw books on the floor, ripped up his character sheet, and was escorted out of the apartment by my husband. My brother-in-law was 27 at the time, but he got away, and gets away with everything because he's the baby of the family. He was never disciplined, he's never worked, and he lives with his 3 children, his wife, and his mother in his mother's house. He pays no bills, and my husband gets called all the time to come and fix things that he broke in a fit of anger. And the absolute great thing is that we're now no longer in contact with the entire family. It's been drama-free, and I'm no longer dreading DMing or playing the game. I'm actually having fun DMing online. Well guys, quite frankly, with all that was said before the last 2 paragraphs, I was convinced that this guy was a man-child. But I guess that you could say that the last 2 paragraphs were the icing on the cake. It just saddens me that this guy not only has a significant other, but has 3 other kids that have to put up with his crap as well. I just hope that the mother is a better role model than him. But as far as he goes as a player, some of what he did was potentially excusable if it was done by almost anyone else but him. And less frequently. Alright guys, that's the end of the first story. We're on to the second one, which is about a not-so-great D&D Discord experience. I was 22 years old when I experienced my first D&D campaign. I've always been into the fantasy genre, and was intrigued what a role-playing experience would be like. I had 3 online friends who decided to give D&D 5e a try, and it was very enjoyable. However, due to schedules, we never got to play much and we stopped after 5 sessions. A year later, I joined a D&D Discord to look for a campaign, and found an interesting one. I was a bit nervous to play with a group of strangers, but was also excited to meet new people and play D&D again. The DM said that there was an opening, and I was invited to a separate group chat. And here's where the red flags begin. The organization was a mess. The campaign was promised to be consisting of mainly 20-plus-year-olds, but there was a teenager in the group, who was about 16 or 17. We were friendly and welcoming, as there are mature teenagers out there, but this one was not. He sent a lot of NSFW images in the Discord, spammed PMs to us for our story and character sheet, and much more. But the teenager is a whole nother story. The DM, when we brought it up to him, just said,
Deal with it. I told him he can join, so I can't back out on my words.
And would just laugh at the NSFW images, knowing how it made some of us uncomfortable. So, to begin with, he was already lying about the original eligibility of the group, and lacked empathy to the members. This was red flag number 1. Our first session then kept getting delayed. The DM apparently didn't have a job, and so he needed to ask his girlfriend for money to buy a laptop for the session. Unnecessary details, but here was red flag number 2, showing how unprepared this was. However, all of us were understanding, as real life can definitely be stressful. Our first session finally began a few weeks later. I reused my first character, which was a tiefling female barbarian with very tanky stats. There were 6 of us in total, including the DM. and I was the only female in the group. First thing off the bat, when I introduced myself, the DM said,
"Dang, now that we're in a voice call, it's more obvious. You're the only female and surrounded by snausages. Welcome to the Snausage Fest. Right, fellas?"
Seeing as how he was trying to joke, I just let it slide as I didn't want to cause any awkwardness at the start of the session. But who the heck says that to the only female of a group? No one else in the group, except for the teenager, laughed along with him, and we moved on quickly. But let's just say that the start of this session already set off an ominous feeling for me. The game started with us arriving at a town, and meeting at a tavern. The rest of the party was kind, and we eventually grouped up and headed out on our first quest, to defeat some bandits. As we traveled to the bandits' hideout, we started to develop a plan, and the DM interrupted us at this time to provide an idea. He said,
"Why don't you guys just have Riss,"
which was my character,
"run up ahead into the open fields? You know, like, 'Oh my god, I'm just a damsel in distress who's so lonely out here.'"
We were at a loss for words at his interruption and plan. Luckily, one member eventually spoke up and said, "She's literally our strongest and most menacing character within the group. Why would this work?" And the DM just said,
"'Cause guys are horny."
I simply said, "No, we're not doing that." But in my mind, I was already done. There's some more awful occurrences during this time, but we'll touch on those later. The D&D session ended about an hour or two later after we fought the bandits. And throughout that fight, I would be constantly attacked due to reasons that I was female, and the bandits would want to kidnap me, which all of us began to be more vocal against. He would just roll his eyes and say,
"Whatever."
He also rushed the fight because his
smoking hot girlfriend
would be there soon, and so he needed it to end. And something to keep in mind here, he was in his 30s and was the oldest member of the group. Yet he acted the most childish of us all, or at least equivalent to the teenager. Looking back to the occurrences that I mentioned, the DM constantly called the members idiots, and he was constantly eating and slurping as he narrated, which was probably one of the most disgusting things that I've heard to this day, and still brings back bad memories. Granted to say, multiple members and I left after that one day. The DM's response was just,
"'Kay, y'all just don't get my humor,"
as he kicked us all from the group chat. I haven't played much D&D since then, but I'm hoping to find a close group of friends to try again. Well, I would definitely say it's worth trying to get a decent group for this again. Sadly, finding a bad DM like this isn't exactly hard, but at least this one wasn't a protracted amount of torture. Alright guys, that's the end of the second story. Now onto the third and last one, which is about a DM that seemingly went temporarily insane. Reading a few of the RPG horror stories has reminded me of one of the worst reasons for "Are you sure?" I have ever seen. For the record, I'm still in this campaign, and the GM has been great, but even the best GMs have their bad moments, and this was theirs. The party consisted of a bunch of baby first-level characters. The opening plot was to go rescue a couple of NPCs that were kidnapped by goblins. Fairly standard stuff. So we headed out, and after a day of wandering around, we finally found the goblin village. Since we were already low on resources, random encounters combined with low-level characters, we decided to camp and hit it in the morning. And an important thing to note here, the goblin village was only about 2 hours away from the town. It just took us a while to find. Our raid on the goblin village went poorly, but we eventually succeeded. But due to bad rolls for us and great rolls for the GM at every turn, it got pretty dang close. People went down to 0 HP or less 5 times during the fight, and every single spell slot or daily resource had been spent. And most people were hurt to various degrees. But nevertheless, victory tasted sweet. The goblins had been slain and the NPCs had been rescued. The plot hook and accompanying treasure had been found. So the party decided to escort the rescued NPCs back to the town, and then rest up for a day and check out the plot hook the day after. At this point, the GM piped up.
I don't want you to go back to town.
Why not?
You would bog down the story.
But we've got the NPCs to escort, and we're all out of resources. We're risking a TPK if we encounter so much as a feral kitten before we've had the chance to rest.
Well, you could always rest here.
Why? What in-character reason would we have to do that? The town's not that far.
Well, I guess you don't have an in-character reason, so if you want to go back to town, then I won't stop you. But are you sure? As you just pointed out, you're low on resources, and there will be encounters along the way.
So you're saying that retracing our steps back to town will have random encounters, which could easily result in a TPK. But spending 24 hours in a decimated goblin village will be perfectly safe. Alright then, I guess we're going to stay here then. What about the rescued NPCs?
Oh, well, they can make it back on their own.
Cue the party scrambling desperately for in-character reasons to stay put, and tell the NPCs that they're on their own, before saying screw it and asking the GM to just fast forward a day. Which they did. Why they couldn't have done something similar with us going back to town is beyond me. Such as, you head back to town, and the NPCs are reunited with their families. It's now the next day. What do you do? Would have taken us much less time than arguing about it. And to this day, I still have no idea why the GM was so determined to railroad us into staying put. Well guys, I'll take the OP at his word on saying that this DM was actually good. Because if he is, then, well, all good DMs also make mistakes. I mean, what the heck was he planning there? You're basically threatening to kill the party if they leave this village, but the NPCs could make it back to the town safely? It really makes no sense to me why he did this. It's like a case of temporary insanity. There seems to be no actual logic behind why he actually did this. If he wanted there to be some sort of plot hook or something, then sure, but there wasn't. It was just, I want you to sleep in the goblin village. Why? Just because. Weird, man. But in any case, guys, that's the end of this one. Hopefully you enjoyed all the stories, and let me know what you guys thought of these stories in the comments. And as always, have a good one.